It certainly is essential to have the goal of limiting the increase in temperature to no more than 2 degrees Celsius by 2050, ideally less than that.
So Oleg, perhaps you would like to start by talking about the International Forum on Energy for Sustainable Development Goals that's hosted in Azerbaijan in October. What are the objectives of this forum?
Good evening, Jessica. It's a pleasure to be here with Dukaskopi TV again. Indeed, we, and by saying we, I mean the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe and other UN regional commissions, there are 5 of them, plus several other partners, jointly with the government of Azerbaijan, will hold the International Forum on Energy for Sustainable Development. It will be the 7th forum. It's an annual event that we organize jointly in Baku this year, 3rd country from the Caucasus that will host the forum. And this year we continue. I mean, it's a follow-up of the process that started back in 2010 in Astana in Kazakhstan. And this year it will be even more representative event. We expect experts, government officials, business people, banking people from essentially all over the world. Most represented regions will be Europe, countries of the former Soviet Union, Asia, Asia and the Pacific, but also Western Asia, Arab countries, and we'll also have representatives from Latin America and from Africa. What are the objectives? The title of the Forum, Energy for Sustainable Development, essentially says what we are aiming for. We will look at all aspects of energy with a view of how it helps with sustainable development. You know that the Sustainable Development Goals were adopted at the United Nations Summit in New York last year in September. Then we had Conference of the Parties of the United Nations Framework Conventions for Climate Change in Paris in December, and 197 countries signed up for that agreement. So energy underpins all the sustainable, well, almost all the sustainable development goals. It certainly is essential to have the goal of limiting the increase in temperature to no more than 2 degrees Celsius by 2050, ideally less than that. And we will be discussing issues related to energy efficiency, which is one of the most cost-effective ways to deal with emissions problems and to deal with energy savings, renewable energy. We will also look at the transition from the fossil fuel economy to a more sustainable economy with bigger share of renewable energy in it. So we will not avoid any issues. They may be tricky politically, but we do want an open dialogue there. We want this forum to serve as a platform, first of all, for the countries to discuss the issues openly and sincerely. Because simply put, different countries use the word sustainable energy differently. For many of them, that means different things. For some, it's ensuring that there is a good access to energy. For some, it's that the energy is green and there is more renewables. So we need to find common ground. We need to find ways for the countries to decide how they can work together and ensure energy security and ensure that that energy underpins economic growth and sustainable development.
And you're right in that it definitely gets countries communicating. So let's take a look at the Paris UN Climate Change Conference last year. So what were some of the communications there? What were some of the promises that were made? Have they been met, and were they started to be implemented yet?
Well, that's a good question. That not that much time has passed since then. It was December last year. We are now almost in September. What did countries commit to? Almost every country that is signatory to the agreement submitted what is called INDCs, intended nationally determined contributions, and that's the contribution of a country to this limiting of the increase in temperature, global temperature, to no more than 2 degrees and possibly less. And those commitments altogether, they don't quite match the goal. But those INDC, the word intended, is supposed to be dropped. It's supposed to be nationally determined contributions. And that process is not yet, I would say it is established, but it's not yet well ahead. What I mean is, right now, the countries that actually ratified convention, not convention, the agreement, Paris Climate Change Agreement, that not just signed it, but ratified it, are only 23. I checked on the website of the UNFCCC today, and it's only 23, and they together constitute just above 1% of global greenhouse gas emissions. So we're not that far ahead. So main countries that really have influence, China, countries of the European Union, United States, Russian Federation, they have not yet ratified. There has been a lot of talk of them ratifying and committing to those NDCs, but that hasn't happened yet. We do hope that it will happen relatively soon, ideally before the next COP, which will be held in Morocco, in Marrakesh, in November this year. But I would say countries are still working out on how they would implement their commitments, whether I believe they're also looking at what other countries are doing. It is a political process, but it is a political process that needs to be dealt with, and that's what in many ways our future depends on. So we hope that would happen.
Well, Oleg, thank you so much for coming in today and sharing your insights.
Thank you, Jessica. It was a pleasure.
Well, that's all from myself and Oleg, but if you did like this interview, then be sure to keep clicking back to Dzioubinski TV.